Detective Marcus Harris leaned back against the cold marble pillar of the courthouse lobby, a satisfied smirk tugging at his mouth. He had done this kind of thing before, too many times to count, but this one felt particularly sweet. Dr. Simone Carter, the woman he'd just seen escorted in with her wrists bound, had been a thorn in his side for months. She was brilliant, polished, and had this maddening way of making people listen to her. When she spoke on television or at those community rallies, her voice carried the kind of conviction that made even good cops uneasy. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She just spoke facts, and facts were dangerous when you were hiding skeletons in your precinct's basement. Beside him, Detective Ryan Cole shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his tie. He wasn't as hardened as Harris. "You sure about this, man?" he muttered, watching the officers lead Simone into the courtroom. "She doesn't look scared." "Doesn't matter what she looks like," Harris replied coolly, pushing off the wall. "She's going down. The files are in her name, the fingerprints are there, and our friend the judge is already in on it. You think she can out-talk evidence?" He chuckled, that low, cynical laugh that came from years of thinking himself untouchable. "This is how the system works, partner. She wanted to play hero. Now she's gonna learn how the real world plays back." Inside the courtroom, Simone Carter sat at the defense table, hands folded neatly in front of her. The cuffs had left faint red marks on her wrists, but her expression was unbothered, calm, almost serene. She wore a charcoal gray suit, pressed and immaculate, her dark curls pinned neatly at the back of her neck. When the bailiff read the charges, embezzlement, fraud, obstruction, she didn't react. The gallery behind her whispered and murmured, a mix of disbelief and fascination. Everyone had heard her name. She was the woman who'd called out the city's corruption, the one who'd demanded transparency in police funding. Now, she was accused of stealing from her own nonprofit. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Harris and Cole took their seats behind the prosecution, their presence casual but deliberate. They wanted her to see them, to know who had done this. Harris leaned forward slightly, waiting for that flicker of panic, that sign that she knew she'd been beaten. But it didn't come. Instead, Simone turned her head slowly, meeting Harris' eyes for the first time. Her gaze was steady, unflinching, and far too calm. He felt something tighten in his chest, irritation, maybe even unease, but he forced a smirk anyway. "Got nothing to say now, huh?" he whispered under his breath, though she couldn't possibly hear him. Across the room, the prosecutor, Leonard Graves, was already reviewing his notes. A slick man in a tailored suit, Graves was the kind of lawyer who made deals in whispers and spent more time at private dinners than in the courtroom. He'd been paid well for this one, not by Simone, of course, but by the people who wanted her quiet. Everything was arranged. The judge, the timeline, the anonymous tip that had sparked the investigation. It was a clean setup. Case 5029, the state versus Dr. Simone Carter, the bailiff announced. The gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber. The judge, Harold Denton, entered looking as if he'd already decided the outcome. He was an old man with weary eyes and a fondness for whiskey, the kind of judge who'd learned long ago that justice was often just a matter of negotiation. He nodded briefly to the prosecution, ignoring Simone entirely. "Let's proceed," he said, voice dry and impatient. Simone's public defender, a young man who looked barely out of law school, leaned toward her nervously. "Dr. Carter, please, if there's anything." "Don't worry," she said softly, without looking away from the bench. "Everything's exactly where it needs to be." Her composure unnerved him. It unnerved everyone. Harris crossed his arms, glancing at Cole, who was still shifting in his seat. "Relax," he muttered. "It's done. She's finished." But somewhere deep inside, that certainty was cracking. He couldn't shake the way she looked at him. Not with fear, not even with anger, but with something else. Something that felt dangerously close to pity. The judge cleared his throat. "Prosecution, you may begin." Graves rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, today the state presents overwhelming evidence that Dr. Simone Carter." Harris stopped listening. He was too busy watching her. Simone sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the judge, an almost imperceptible smile forming at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't defiance. It was confidence, quiet, powerful, and utterly unshakable. And for the first time in his career, Detective Marcus Harris felt something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. The courtroom air was thick, the kind of silence that hummed beneath the drone of ceiling fans and whispered suspicion. Judge Denton adjusted his glasses, trying to mask his unease. Everything was supposed to move quickly. The script had been written, rehearsed, and bought. The prosecution would lay out the case, the defense would crumble under pressure, and by lunch, Simone Carter would be led out in cuffs again, disgraced, broken, silenced. That was how these things worked. That was how they always worked. Your Honor, the prosecutor, Leonard Graves, began smoothly, we have before us a textbook case of white-collar fraud. Simone rose before he could finish. The sound of her chair sliding back against the polished floor made everyone look up. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't raise her hand. She simply stood, poised, calm, and radiating a quiet authority that clashed sharply with her supposed role as the accused. The judge frowned. Dr. Carter, he said with irritation, you'll have your turn to speak after the prosecution. With respect, Your Honor, Simone interrupted gently, there's been a development you'll want to be aware of before these proceedings continue. The room shifted, confused murmurs rippling through the gallery. Harris, sitting in the second row, exchanged a glance with his partner. What the hell is she doing? Cole whispered. Simone nodded to the bailiff. Officer, the envelope, please. The bailiff hesitated, glancing toward the judge. Denton gave a small nod, annoyed, but curious. The officer retrieved a thick, sealed envelope from the inside pocket of Simone's blazer, where she'd kept it tucked since her arrest. He brought it forward and handed it up to the bench. Judge Denton frowned, breaking the red wax seal with the tip of his letter opener. The courtroom fell silent, the only sound the faint rustle of heavy paper as he unfolded the letter inside. His eyes flicked across the words once. Then again. The color drained from his face. What is this? He asked, voice trembling slightly. An official order from the Department of Justice, Simone replied evenly, her voice steady, carrying easily through the room. As of this morning, this case and all related investigations have been transferred to the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Internal Affairs. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The prosecutor's confident smile faltered. Judge Denton blinked rapidly, scanning the letter again as if hoping he'd misread it. The letterhead was unmistakable. Gold seal, federal insignia, multiple signatures. This is impossible, he stammered. Simone tilted her head. Impossible, or inconvenient. The judge glared down at her, but she didn't flinch. Her composure was unnerving. Even the bailiff shifted his stance, uncertain of whose authority he was under now. Leonard Graves stepped forward, voice tight. Your Honor, with all due respect, this document could be fabricated. We can't just. It's authenticated. Simone cut in, her tone clipped but controlled. You'll find the verification code on the second page. Cross-check it, if you wish. The department doesn't take forgery lightly. Harris leaned toward Cole, his voice barely above a whisper. She's bluffing. Cole didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the judge's hands, trembling as they turned the page, scanning the confirmation seal embossed into the paper. This is genuine, Denton muttered. Effective immediately. All charges against the defendant are suspended pending review by a federal task force. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. Simone stood still in the middle of the chaos, her presence commanding without effort. Leonard Graves's composure cracked. Your Honor, this can't be happening. She's under arrest. Was under arrest, Simone corrected softly. And as of today, I am under no such restriction. Her lawyer, the young man who had looked ready to faint earlier, sat frozen, staring at her as though she were a completely different person. Judge Denton rubbed his temple. This is highly irregular, he muttered. Justice usually is, when it's been tampered with, Simone said quietly, her eyes sweeping the courtroom. For months, this city has been operating under the illusion that corruption is a rumor, that no one dares to touch the men who hide behind badges and titles. That ends today. Every word hit like a stone. Harris' smirk had long since faded. He felt heat rising up his neck. The air that had once tasted like victory now felt sharp and metallic, like fear. Simone turned toward the gallery, scanning the faces until she found him. Her gaze locked on his, steady and knowing. Some of you in this room, she said, know exactly what I'm talking about. The prosecutor sputtered, objection. She's grandstanding. But the judge didn't respond. He was still staring at the letter, the weight of its seal crushing whatever fragments of power he thought he had. Simone continued, unbothered. The Bureau has been conducting a parallel investigation. Every document you've submitted, every false witness statement, every bribe, all of it has been tracked, recorded, and authenticated. The evidence speaks for itself. Now the whispers had turned into panic. Harris' pulse thundered in his ears. He gripped the edge of the bench in front of him, trying to keep his expression neutral. Cole leaned closer, whispering, Marcus, what if she's telling the truth? Harris didn't answer. His mind was already spinning, calculating escape routes, possible deniability. Simone didn't look away from him. You can feel it, can't you? She said softly, though only he could hear. The moment the power shifts. The judge swallowed hard and cleared his throat. This court is in recess until further notice. He slammed the gavel down, but the sound felt hollow, like a surrender disguised as procedure. And as Simone calmly gathered her papers, Harris realized the thing that terrified him most wasn't what she'd just done. It was the unmistakable glint in her eyes, the look of someone who wasn't finished yet. The gavel's echo was still fading when Simone turned toward the table where her handcuffs sat, open and gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She picked them up calmly, as if they were nothing more than a misplaced accessory, and clicked them shut with a soft metallic snap, not around her wrists, but in her hand, like a token of everything that had just shifted. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief, whispers bouncing off the walls like static. Judge Denton had fled through the side door moments after declaring recess, his robe flapping behind him, his face pale as parchment. The prosecutor, Leonard Graves, was furiously making phone calls that no one seemed to answer. The two detectives, Harris and Cole, sat frozen, as if movement might make them visible to the wrong kind of attention. Simone stepped forward, her heels striking the marble with deliberate, measured confidence. She stopped in the center of the room and turned, addressing no one in particular, yet everyone felt she was speaking directly to them. Do you know what's interesting about corruption? She said softly, her voice carrying even without effort. It's never as hidden as people think. It thrives on arrogance, the kind that assumes no one's watching. She looked at the row where Harris sat. His jaw was tight, his palms slick with sweat. He forced himself to glare back at her, but there was no conviction in it. Detective Harris, she said suddenly, calling him by name. Heads turned. Would you like to stand? He blinked. What? Please, she said, her tone polite but commanding. Stand up. He hesitated, glancing around. Every camera, every eye, was fixed on him. Slowly, he rose to his feet. Thank you, Simone said, offering a smile so precise it could have cut glass. You've been working on this case for what, 3 months? Longer, he muttered. Long enough to fabricate evidence, she said. Long enough to pay off witnesses. Long enough to make sure your own fingerprints were wiped from every file you touched. Except one. Harris' breath hitched. That's not true. Oh, it's very true, Simone replied, walking toward him. The room was silent except for the echo of her heels. When you frame someone, detective, you should never underestimate your opponent. You made one small mistake, a timestamp. You forged a security log that placed me at an office I hadn't entered in months. The Bureau traced it in less than an hour. Cole looked like he might faint. Wait. The Bureau. Simone stopped inches from them, her expression calm but lethal. You thought this was just a federal intervention. She slipped a hand into her blazer pocket and produced a small identification case. When she flipped it open, the seal of the Department of Justice gleamed beneath the courtroom lights. As of 9 a.m. today, I am the newly appointed Director of Internal Affairs for the state's Department of Justice. Which means, detectives, I now oversee all internal investigations, including your precinct. The color drained from Harris' face. The prosecutor dropped his phone, the clatter ringing through the room like a gunshot. Simone took a step back, addressing everyone now. For months, we've gathered evidence. Every falsified report, every bribe accepted, every falsified testimony. This entire network of deceit, from the courtroom to the precinct, ends today. She nodded once toward the doors. They burst open. 2 federal marshals entered, their dark suits crisp, their presence heavy with authority. They moved without hesitation toward Harris and Cole. "Wait," Harris barked, his voice cracking. "You can't just." "I can," Simone interrupted. "And I will. You're both under arrest for obstruction of justice, falsification of evidence, and conspiracy." The marshals pulled Harris' arms behind his back, the sharp click of handcuffs filling the air. The same sound he had once taken pleasure in hearing on others now landed on his own wrists like judgment. Cole didn't resist. He simply sat down and buried his face in his hands. Leonard Graves tried to back away, stammering, I was just following orders." Simone turned to him with a look that silenced him instantly. "You were following money," she said coldly. "There's a difference." He froze as a third marshal appeared to escort him out as well. For a long moment, the room was utterly still. Reporters whispered into recorders. Spectators stared, wide-eyed, realizing they had just witnessed a power reversal so complete it felt cinematic. Simone exhaled slowly, turning toward the bench where the judge had sat minutes before. "Justice," she said quietly, "isn't about power. It's about accountability." She placed the open handcuffs on the judge's desk, a symbol, deliberate and unshakable. "And today," she added, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "accountability has a new name." As the marshals led the crooked officers away, the camera flashes began, a storm of light and sound. Simone didn't flinch. She simply turned, collected her briefcase, and walked toward the exit. The air around her seemed to shift as she passed, like gravity itself had changed direction. Outside, sunlight poured through the courthouse doors, dazzling and clean. The crowd waiting beyond erupted into noise, reporters shouting questions, bystanders cheering, others too stunned to speak. Simone paused at the top of the steps, looking out over the chaos she had just turned into order. Behind her, the sound of police radios crackled with confusion, the empire of corruption beginning to crumble under its own weight. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a real smile. Not of victory, but of relief, a quiet acknowledgement that the fight was far from over, but it was finally hers to lead. Then she descended the courthouse steps, leaving behind the men who had once believed they could destroy her, and walking straight into the role they never saw coming.